There's nothing wrong with thinking.
No, I like thinking. Thinking is fun. You know what I was thinking yesterday?
No,
Why is Darren DeVries going to West Virginia?
that's bugging you, isn't
It
it?
really is.
I know.
It seems like a weird fit. And don't
Well,
get me wrong, this is not a I don't think he's good enough for West Virginia. I understand why West Virginia would want Coach DeVries. I don't totally understand why Coach DeVries would want West Virginia. Maybe it's the best offer on the table. Maybe he's looking at the landscape and says, I don't know what else is going to be available. But it's a little bit of a head scratcher for me.
do you think Michigan or he reached out to the other first?
If I was Michigan,
Or do you think May was just the hot guy?
So that's kind of what I want to get into here, because
you had Sprinkle, May, and probably Coach DeVries, right?
if you're Michigan,
Mhm.
I know what I think. If you're Michigan, would you rather have Dusty May or Coach DeVries?
DeVries' track record of winning is longer, but May has the Final Four.
How much does that matter?
That I don't know.
Because, and this is probably mostly anecdotal, but if you look at the guys that get hired after their hot run, and I get it was a year removed, but a lot of those guys don't succeed at a super high level.
You want like a little longer body of work?
I would rather have a consistent level of accomplishment than I would one really deep NCAA run, right? Like Dan Munson, who just got let go at Long Beach State despite making the NCAA tournament, which is a little funny, is a great example. He gets the Elite Eight run at Gonzaga, immediately goes to Minnesota, and he's been a 500 coach most of his career, right? At Gonzaga, he was only there for 2 years, but Minnesota and Long Beach State, which he's been there forever, mostly a 500 coach. He has the one really nice run that he's made a whole career out of. But you look at him, you look at Andy Enfield, he gets the Sweet 16 run with FGCU, and he's okay. He's he's not special. He's just a guy, right? We look at Shaka.
He's unfortunately he's become the guy that hired a staff that could get a couple of brothers to come play for him because I mean like birth brothers.
Yes, not like
because
with like an ER brothers.
Their dad were on staff.
Not like brothers.
Or then you get I get that. Or
look at Shaka.
What about Tommy Lloyd?
What about Tommy Lloyd?
Is that more of your working theory? Or you're looking at a guy that had been a head coach?
A head coach.
Okay.
Head coach. I mean, the assistants, I have a hard time deciphering because you don't really know what people's roles are on staffs, right, at any different place. So I have a hard timing like, well, he's the recruiter or he's this, that, whatever. But I'm talking about sitting head coaches. You go to Shaka Smart. It took him a really long time to do anything. And this is the first time he's made it past the second round since that Final Four.
Let me ask you something. Do you think basketball works like football, where schools look for builders, right? Do you think West Virginia looks at themselves and says, gosh, you know what? We're not going to be a portal. We're not a portal team, probably.
Okay.
We want to build and develop.
I would guess West Virginia doesn't see themselves that way, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think West Virginia is very proud of their basketball history.
Because I think that anybody in basketball can be a portal player, right?
Yes, in terms of schools.
Yeah.
Any school can turn themselves into a portal.
And you can quickly rebuild.
Yeah. I don't know that schools, especially Power 5 schools, Power 6 schools, whatever you want to call it,
look at basketball like football.
I don't know that they look for builders. Now, that's kind of what makes Coach Mack.
We hired one, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what makes Coach Mack and Creighton unique. But it was also a very unique situation. Creighton was a mid-major when he got hired. Mm-hmm. They were a mid-major, and he kind of coached them like a mid-major and developed and recruited like a mid-major. And I don't mean that in quality of players.
Although you could make the case, though, that his portal history is
very good.
It's unbelievable.
But it's also very specific, right? He doesn't blanket slate go get portal guys. He goes and finds points of need, right? He goes and gets guys that he needs. He went and got Stephen Ashworth because Ryan Nembhard left, right? Like he went and got Isaac Trout because Arthur Kaluma left, although he might have been.
They had to practice against Foster for a year.
They had to practice against Foster for a year. They had to practice Watson and Huff for a year. They got Ryan Hawkins, who was filling a very specific need. Like, they went and got Baylor Shireman. They are very successful in the portal. They don't do it a ton in terms of making the roster over. But again, he reminds me, and this is very high praise because you know how much I admire this guy as a coach. He is doing to the best of his ability what Jay Wright did at Villanova. Now, obviously, there's no national titles or Final Fours for Coach McDermott yet, but Jay Wright, at the beginning of his tenure at Villanova, made the one Final Four run, realized he had access to better players, and was bad for a good stretch after that. Almost got fired from Villanova because he left the identity of who he was. There are builders in college basketball. There's not very many of them. And I don't know that schools specifically look for that.
I don't think you can be in college basketball anymore.
I think you have to have an unbelievable situation to be allowed to. And most of the time, that's at a mid-major level or below. It's really hard to do at a high major level.
I don't know. I think the mid-major is so afraid of getting guys plucked.
Sure.
Like, that's something that they're going to have
option?
They're going to have to reconcile. I get it, because you're
not going to recruit bad players.
Yeah. No, I know.
Right? So you either have, hey, I'm going to try and get 3 years out of this guy. I want one okay year, one pretty good year, one great year, then he's gone.
Well, your eye for talent has to be unbelievable.
You also almost have to operate your program like it's a JUCO. You expect guys to be there for 2 years.
Okay, so
we just know there's going to be a ton of roster turnover.
So do you think? So Crutch actually, they inherited Fidler. They didn't recruit him. So he was there for the first year. You think they were thinking all along, as he's to develop, we're not going to have this guy for the duration? We're like a JUCO?
I don't know.
Because you and I have debated. We didn't debate. We talked about a level in which you feel like Omaha could have a sustainable program if they would look at the development in state differently.
Yep.
Which is going to take a little more time.
Yes.
Because now, listen, you got Kyle the third in the portal. You got Frankie in the portal. So it's like one of those. They both did what you kind of would hope happened if they both were at Omaha, not just the one, right? Take a year, starting to get better, really good
year, and then move on.
I don't. So
hear me out, though. Hear me out. We talk about how much we admire Coach Rule for the way he handled Tony White and the way he handles Tony White.
Okay.
He knows Tony White's not going to be here long term. He knows that without a shadow of a doubt. Why can't mid-major coaches operate that way? Why can't they operate like Cal, where they know? And listen, I know we have issues with Cal, but this isn't one of them for me. Coach Calipari knows 100% these guys are not coming back for year 2. And if they come back for year 2, they're sure as hell not coming back for year 3. And if they do, they're probably not good enough to play for me, right? Why can't you be invested in their success and understand that that's better for you long term? Like, why is that not a thing? Why is that not okay? I understand that there's probably some resentment towards the bigger programs for coming and plucking your guys, but if you're the program that consistently sends guys from the Summit League to the Big East or from the Summit League to the Big Ten, you don't think more guys are going to want to come to you? Like, if you not only develop them that way, but you embrace your part in their journey in that way. Because you know what? It's really easy to do. It's really easy to want to squeeze and hold on to Tony White and say, oh, man, stay here as long as you want or stay here as long as you can. And you try and offer him more and more and more to get him to stay here. But guess what? Tony White's a superstar. He's leaving. You know what that's great for? Hiring the next defensive coordinator at Nebraska.
Well, here's the thing about college coaches in basketball. This circle may be even tighter than the one in football. And I know there's 3 times as many people, but they see each other
all the time because they're at AAU, they're at the gyms. Like,
know what I mean?
Every single coach in the world goes to the Final Four. Like, yes.
So,
is what I described plausible?
Yeah.
Is it realistic?
I just don't know for how long.
What keeps it from being realistic long term?
Finding the products that you can continually make that other people will covet in 2 to 3 years. That's a tough system to.
It is.
It's a tough system to regurgitate.
You know what's a harder system to regurgitate?
Find good players.
A, finding good players in the first place. B,
no, I just kind of.
I mean, at the mid-major level, it's really hard to like. So I mean, threading the needle between a guy that's a good player but not good enough to move on. Threading that needle is harder than developing.
All right. Just need a little clarity.
Yeah, like to me.
And the second point was, so like if I'm developing guys that they're going to eventually
move
on. Is this some sort of open conversation, or are you banking on the fact that you're going to get players that understand?
I would recruit on it.
Hey, listen, help the team out.
For a couple years.
Us out for a couple years.
And
then you'll get to go do your thing.
Because
that would be an unbelievable culture.
It would be, right? But isn't that what we want?
Man, to sustain that,
be really hard. Is it any harder than trying to find good players that aren't good enough to leave? Because that's a pretty fine line.
Man,
and I know that line.
I may pick the latter, but there are some schools that are known for just be here for a little bit
and move on.
Yeah.
Is it any different than Coach Cal being like, hey, I know you're really good.
No, that's different because he's getting the best of the best.
Sure. But you're still
and those guys already know wherever they go, they're not going to be there very long.
And that's okay.
They're not really taking one for the team. They're with a blue blood.
No, they're not taking one for the team.
You know what I mean?
But his strategy of how he operates, he's very open about, hey, you need to move on next year. You're coming here to get to the NBA. Like if you have that open conversation, that's why I said operate like a JUCO, right?
But it hasn't worked for him because he doesn't have the continuity or the chemistry within his basketball teams. His good teams were his older teams that actually had some guys that stuck around for a couple of years.
But here's my question. We're grading mid-majors on a different scale, right? Can it work to make the tournament consistently? Can it work to win your conference consistently? Because here's what I think would happen is if you have a reputation, I mean, look at
you know what kind of sounds like you're describing?
What?
GCU. Not GCU. GCU, Grand Canyon.
Of guys that move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's openly their strategy.
I don't either.
But it sort of looks like
when you look at their campus,
yeah,
the money that's invested in all their no, seriously. My kiddo's friend, her best friend goes to GCU. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the premise of GCU is unbelievable. I think it takes you have to look at it that way. I don't think it happens by accident.
No, you have to embrace it. This is not something that you could do on accident.
Not sure we could do that here. I'm dead serious.
Why is that?
Because we even struggle to gravitate towards. Now we're getting better, but we even struggle to gravitate towards guys in the portal that Nebraska football is only going to get for 1 or 2 years. Like those aren't our guys.
Okay, but do we view Nebraska football differently than we view Omaha basketball?
No, what I'm telling you is I think it's a Nebraska thing. I think it's a state thing. I think it's how we feel about the people that we root for.
Let me ask this though, and I don't mean this to be disparaging to Omaha at all. Do they fly under the radar enough that people only pay attention when they have a star like Frankie Fidler, or they start winning and have a chance to make the NCAA tournament?
Like Thurman and Hollins and those guys.
Where you're not as.
But even there was the local tie. I don't know.
Because if you're not paying as much attention, maybe you don't care about the nitty gritty of how the guys got there.
Because the Creighton thing, that stretch.
Yeah, Tradeon and Trayshawn.
There was a local flair that was a draw.
Absolutely.
Now they happened to be really good, but we got Tradeon on the rebound.
Yeah, how did you?
And so we were okay with that, but because
he was local,
he was from here,
but also because they were good.
Yeah, that's
like I think that matters because I don't want to sit here and be disingenuous and pretend like we go into the roster construction of Omaha basketball the way we do Nebraska football. I mean, that's not real.
No, but what I'm telling you is if you're talking about sustainability and that's how you want to grow the program, everybody around you has to accept that's what it is. You still have some Creighton fans that had a hard time handling. I mean, Coach Mack has done a masterful job of recruiting just enough of his own guys and sprinkling it in with the portal to keep some Creighton fans at bay.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, you'd be the dirty school up the road. I say that tongue in cheek. Oh, they have too many transfers. There's too much roster turnover, and I don't know who to like. I've heard these things before.
Dave on Twitter mentions a good point. He says, I'm describing the argument of a high-level D1 baseball coach. You need players good enough to get you to Omaha, but not so good that they get drafted so high that they never show up in the first place. And that's a fair. He says it's
kind of.
I mean,
I get the premise, so I'm not going to pick at that. I get it.
I'm familiar with the situation from my end too, because when you're coaching at the NAIA level, you obviously need guys that can compete at that level. But if they get too good, then you're going to get D2 start to offer. If they get too good, you're going to have D1 walk-on offers. And so you're kind of sitting there in this middle ground. And I used to tell this to guys when I would recruit them, because a lot of guys in high school would be like, I want to, hopefully one day play overseas or something like that. You don't get a lot of guys that I was talking to that talk about the NBA. A lot of guys would be like, hey, I want to play overseas, whatever. And I'm like, listen, man, I appreciate that. I love the dream. I love the grind, the work ethic, whatever. If you're good enough, like, yes, you're going to have an opportunity to play overseas. We've sent guys overseas before. But I was like, if your goal is to play professional basketball, you probably wouldn't be having this conversation with me. You'd be having this conversation with somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? That's a hard conversation to have with a 17-year-old. What an easier conversation to have with a 17-year-old is?
I don't know, though. Is it?
It was. Because a lot of
you're talking about like your recruiting experience.
What's an easier conversation to have with these kids? What's an easier conversation is to say, because this is why I got beat out for JUCOs all the time, because their pitch was, hey, if you succeed here, you go to a D1. I wasn't going to have that conversation because I knew we had never sent a kid to a D1. We've sent a few kids overseas. We've sent a few kids to play professional basketball. Never sent a single kid to play D1. And we had a couple that probably could
have. I think we're kind of selling the student, the kid short.
In what sense?
Because occasionally you'll get folks that aren't operating in the know. But for the most part, they'll be able to look at your track record. So you're not going to be able to make up anything anyway. So even if a junior college guy comes to a guy and says, hey, I can get you to a bigger destination.
Yeah.
That's the whole premise of junior college.
100%.
So everybody's operating kind of in the know.
Yeah.
That's different for schools that want to have success in non-major conferences, because you're not.
But the JUCO coaches want to win still, right?
Yeah, but hang on, listen to what I'm telling you. So for mid-major coaches to sell that, they have to have a track record of being good at it.
Yeah.
If you have a track record of being good at it, the problem kind of takes care of itself. The problem is if you want to use, get where I'm going? So the problem is if you want to use Omaha as an example,
as a stepping stone,
they have to have a track record of doing it. So you need another Frankie Fidler type or two going on
to prove proof of concept.
So let me go back to what I originally told you. I think Coach Crutch's, and we're only talking about Omaha because it's a tangible example.
Because it's right here in our backyard. Yeah.
I told you I felt like that was their recruiting premise early on, and you didn't really like it. Maybe that was in addition to or separate than you wanted more local guys.
I think there's too many local guys beating them
because what I think you're describing is what that staff originally thought.
And that's fair if that is. What it looked like to me, what they originally thought is the guys around here aren't good enough to help us win. That's how I took it. And I don't know if they viewed it like that or not. I'm probably projecting a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to say that because I
don't know. I really don't.
Yeah.
But that's why I bristled up at their strategy.
That was their recruiting premise. And I know some people locally, like we know a guy that is so mad with that recruiting blueprint that he talks about it openly.
Yeah.
You saw him a couple Saturdays ago.
Yeah.
Guy that looks like Dana White.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
So I think it's widely known that that's the strategy. We were just trying to decide, does that work? And how many of those guys do you have to put out? Because I imagine Frankie will go back, ask Maddie and those guys that were at practice. I'm guessing he's going to go back to practice today.
Yep. He was at Creighton practice yesterday, if you don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. and which I'm a little surprised at.
Why is that?
Because I think originally when I was thinking about this last week, I was like the fit.
It's a weird fit,
but it's almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, they have a tremendous NIL setup.
Yes, they also have a tremendous strength and conditioning setup,
and it's virtually impossible to get into that program and leave and be a worse player. So
certainly seems that way.
Certainly
seems that way.
His track record of getting guys better
is really good.
It's unbelievable.
Here's my question, though.
But I do know their NIL structure this is firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
Their NIL structure is relatively tiered. You got a guy or two.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's
the majority.
Yep.
And you got
but everybody does something.
Back into the
okay. So what would that high end look like for that fit relative to what
it looks at other places
on the open market? Like let's say Kentucky, for instance.
I'm just going to be honest. I don't know if Frankie is that guy at the high major level.
Listen, I'm telling you, he's gonna get.
No, I know he's going to get a bag. I get that.
But that's part of it, though, right?
No,
this is the conversation we're talking about.
But if I'm Creighton,
we're talking about the baseline
for sure.
And the development at Creighton, because Mac's not gonna. It's just not their style.
I don't know.
He's not going to be a mercenary bag guy.
No,
you have to fit.
And I don't know that Frankie is going to fit in a way that makes Creighton's offer comparable to other places, because they do have Jackson McAndrew coming in, who I think is unbelievable. They do have Mason Miller coming back, we assume. They do have Isaac Trout coming back, which I think he ends up being a 5, but right now he's a 4.
A year in their fitness program, an offseason in their
he might
fitness
be back
program.
To a 4.
It will be interesting for.
But I'm also interested to see,
IT.
could he play a stretch 5 and give people nightmares? Can he be 6'10" Ethan Rogge? Because that kind of sounds super fun to me. Like, maybe I'm crazy, but
no, I don't think that's crazy.
Like, can you imagine Mac coaching a team that has a 6'10" version of Ethan Rogge?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, because would you imagine? Has to be a pretty free-flowing offense. Would you? I don't think he would be considered like an athletic wing.
No. Whom, Frankie or
yeah?
Oh yeah.
So I don't
think you can move him to 3. Like, I don't think you can move Frankie to the 3, which is why you have the log jam at the 4. Like, between Jackson McAndrew and Mason Miller and Jason Green, I don't know. Now maybe you can move. Maybe Jason's athletic enough to move down to a wing.
Although he would be a nice offensive tool for Coach Mac at the 4.
Frankie?
Yeah. He'd be that would be.
But where's the minutes? That's the problem.
Yeah.
You either have to turn Mason and Jason into 3s, which maybe Mason's pretty bouncy. He moves okay. Jason is a pretty good athlete. Like, I don't know if you can get them to become your 3s so that you can have room for McAndrew and Fidler at your 4.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe works, but I think there's a minutes log jam there that they'd have to address.